Part 2. On the Mount. Chapter 1. The Angel of the Golden Ball.
On this encouraging note, let us say goodbye, said our guide, when we had travelled away from the House of Conclave. We have not learned enough yet, I urged, seeking to detain her, and Janet added, Our search for wisdom is not finished. It will never be finished. We smiled at each other, for of course we had known this, but we wanted so to keep our dear angel with us. You will not be alone, she explained, answering our thoughts. That one is already on his way to you. Which one? I asked, making a very good guess in my heart. That angel who was with you in the haven of prayer. Again we shared a smile, for she knew how much this news would mean to us. Where shall we meet him? Janet asked. On the other side of your doubled power, said our guide. Yes, you will need it now again. I thought we had it already, I exclaimed. We had that little ceremony when we were with the angel before, and the strange expansion of consciousness. Children, said our angel, if you could stay in this doubled power, but it is long gone from you before you arrive on the plane between. It comes and it goes so gently that you scarcely notice it. Come now, she invited briskly. Just relax beside me and have no fear. Her voice faded in our ears, and we quickly sank into that drowsiness we had experienced before. We forgot that we were speeding above the plains of heaven's realm. Again we knew that mighty growing, that infinite knowing. At last we heard our guide's voice like a whisper on the wind. Farewell, Bernard Janet. Immediately we opened our eyes, but we were unable to see her. She had wheeled off so rapidly that the sight of her was lost in the distant mist. I wonder when we shall see that first angel, said Janet, and before she had ceased speaking he was beside us. How joyfully we smiled upon him. I resolved that we would discover, before he left us again, how to contact him when we willed. Well, did you play hard in the plane between? He demanded. How did you know we were going to? I retorted. You had gone before we decided that. Ah, how indeed, he echoed, teasing us. Soon, my children, you have learned to answer your own questions. All of them? Janet asked in surprise. Well, not quite all, he said, with mocking gravity. We had been travelling rapidly upward during this conversation, and suddenly my glance was focused on a huge glowing ball which seemed to be suspended in the air. What is that? I asked in surprise. It is a sphere of knowledge. Oh. We both looked at it in wonder. Poised against the blue of the sky, it looked like an enormous golden balloon. Does anyone dwell there? Janet asked. Yes, the angel of the golden ball. Now this was so mysterious and so intriguing that we remained silent for a great while as we sped rapidly towards the sphere. We watched it grow larger and larger as we approached until it seemed to fill the whole sky. We saw that its surface was soft and yielding. I smiled to myself when I realised that Janet was thinking it looked like a highly magnified mimosa ball. Well, perhaps it did. There were no doors, I discovered as we reached its side. Without any difficulty we passed right into it. It was dark. That was my first impression. Then as my eyes grew accustomed to it, I realised that the sphere was lit with an amber twilight, restful, soothing, sleep-inducing. Were we lying down in this golden silence? I was not sure. It was certainly a time of rest. At the same time I became aware of concentrating on the space between my eyes. How strange, I thought drowsily, but I continued to concentrate. I took deep breaths and thought cleanly of the breath reaching upward towards that space. Gradually, as I thought of this, something began to revolve within it. At first I took it to be a wheel, then I discovered it to be a ball, spinning rapidly. It is the ball of knowledge. Did I think these words, or was my angel speaking? Of this I was uncertain. I only knew that this was the ball that held all knowledge. All knowledge, all knowledge, I thought dreamily. But it is hidden. It is hidden within the ball. How shall I reach it? Again came the words. It will unwind, and then you will see and know. Then I shall see and know. How often I had longed for knowledge, for the answer to my questioning. As I mused, watching the rapidly whirling ball between my eyes, there appeared in the midst of it a tiny figure of an angel. Why, it is the angel of the golden ball, I thought in surprise. He bowed to me and smiled. In a moment, a sense of comfort and security encompassed me, such as I had never known before. He was my angel. He alone could unwind the golden ball of knowledge. I knew, then, that I could leave it all to him, that the instant a certain knowing was necessary to my growth, he would unwind it and I would see. The ball whirled on. We smiled into one another's eyes in deep content. Then, as I rested, the vision grew dim. The great walls of the sphere seemed to recede until they faded quite away. There, beside us, was our angel guide. Why, we are in a garden, Janet cried amazedly. Where is the golden sphere? We looked up in wonder at the empty blue sky. Would it surprise you, smiled our angel, to know there is no golden sphere? We could only gaze at him, and he continued, No, do not mistake my meaning. It was not an illusion. The sphere of knowledge is not up in the sky. It is within you. 2. A veil from our eyes. Janet and I looked at each other, then our eyes returned to the angel. We must have shown the dismay we felt, for he had made a little caressing gesture as though to reassure us, then began to teach us in steady, firm tones. This truth, that all knowledge is within, like the truth that heaven is within, frequently leads to people either to disbelieve or to take a very gloomy view of things. Now there is not the slightest need for this. He smiled at us, and we hastily composed our faces, trying to look more happy, and indeed we were beginning to feel so. That is better, commented our kind teacher. I do not like to see my students rebellious, you know. Were we rebellious? I asked, and Janet added, We do not want to ever be that. Well, just for a moment, perhaps. People so readily understand the simple, low things, but when they are shown high things they do not at once understand, and are inclined to think these are not so nearly so attractive. But be assured of this, children. He paused impressively. The higher teaching is always more attractive than the low, whatever your first impression. It but leads you step by step to the unfolding of the truth of the Father, and the truth is wonderful beyond all our dreams. Do angels dream? Janet asked in surprise. Yes, our dreams are all of a time when we shall have drawn closer to the Father's love. Now, he continued, when we speak of the within, people think we mean that life is an illusion, a series of pictures taking place in the mind. This is not so. We drew closer to him, enchanted. Then it is not like that, Janet exclaimed. I am so glad. Tell us of the within, I pleaded. Man has within himself, said our angel, many bodies which each attuned to a particular plane of consciousness. The planes interpenetrate each other to a certain extent, the outer fringe of one overlapping the inner fringe of another, as it were. Thus it is possible to raise or lower consciousness, to leave off using one's body and use another which will function on the higher plane. All without moving from the first plane? I asked. Yes, it is quite possible to remain, say, in the plane between, according to outward appearances, while your raised consciousness brings into operation a higher state body where you can live for a time in the haven of prayer. We thought of the expansion of consciousness of our doubled power and began to understand a little. It will not be very clear to you yet, cautioned our angel, but be very sure the knowledge is there. At the right time, when you are quite ready, the angel of the golden ball will begin to unwind the thread, and then you will see. We were silent for a while, and then I asked, Does one never travel then? Oh yes, said our guide. On earth there are two kinds of travel. You can walk to a place or you can go there in thought. It is so here. The walking is equivalent to journeyings about the plains, and the thought is like the expansion of consciousness when one merely steps from one body into another. It's all very deep and strange, said Janet, but even so I do begin to grasp it. Then let me help you further, said the angel. I want you to visualize in your minds the figure of a man sitting in a ploughed field upon the good, loose earth. Yes, Janet and I had instinctively closed our eyes. Across the field flows a mighty river. It looks as if it will drown the man, but although it engulfs him, he is safe, for he rises out of his earth body and begins to function in a water body. By this I mean that he finds he can live beneath the water like a fish, having his own consciousness and looking exactly the same, without any inconvenience at all. Useful, Janet commented, and I heard the smile in our teacher's voice as he continued. Now visualize a great net drawn through the water by an unseen hand. It seems that the man will be entangled within it, but he merely leaves his water body and begins to live in a mist body or an air body. He still looks the same, but more ethereal, and he can easily pass through the net. Now he rises up out of the water, mingling with the air around him, and since his body is of air, also, everything he touches is solid and real to him. He still has his own consciousness and his own appearance, so that those who are functioning in air bodies also can see him, speak with him, shake hands with him if they will. Then a great beam of light pours through the air, catching and holding the mist body, so that for a moment it can be seen by earth eyes as mist bodies sometimes are. The man, however, emerges in a light or fire body, and so finds himself able to live quite normally in the beam. His consciousness and appearances remain as before, yet he is clothed in light and lives in light. Presently, retracing his steps, he returns at last to the earth body in the field. Can you see him? Yes, we whispered. The man stretches and yawns, rubs his eyes and slowly awakes. Well, he says, that is queer. I thought I had travelled far away from this field to many wonderful lands, and here I am all the time. It must have been a dream. How wonderful, Janet breathed. Then all these wonderful heaven worlds are around us, I mused. Is that why we could not pass through the mystery screen which hung before the entrance of the Hall of Reporters? Yes, our guide agreed, smiling into our now opened eyes, and this in a double sense. Is that why angels' wings just looked like mingled colours the first time we saw them in the Hall of Audience? Janet asked. Our angel smiled in sympathy with our joy. Yes, now is not the higher truth more attractive than the lower? Much, much, much more, we agreed fervently. 3. The Garden of Desire. Shall we walk a while? Our angel suggested. We rose at once with a great eagerness, for our eyes had strayed, from time to time, along the path of this fragrant garden, wondering where it led. As we walked slowly along, I was surprised to see that my shoulder was not nearly so far below the angel's as it had been at first. Glancing at Janet, I saw that she too had appeared to have grown. Then I saw that the angel was watching me. Have you noticed it at last? He smiled. Have we grown? I asked, and Janet immediately glanced from one to the other, realizing it too. In a way, yes, said our guide. You remember what I have said about the many bodies of the inwardness of man? Well, each higher state body appears to be taller than the last. Thus, you unconsciously step out of one body to live for the time on a higher plane. You appear to have grown. It is a symbol of your inner growth. I had been thinking of the bodies of man as one of those large bricks which children of the earth play with, and in which they fit smaller ones until they cannot fit any more. Janet chuckled. Now you have upset all my calculations. The angel laughed. Your thought picture is quite a good one, nevertheless. The truth as seen on earth, remember, is often a reflection only of heaven's truth. Besides, heaven cannot really be measured, and that is why I said to you, you appeared to be taller. Then I will keep my picture, Janet decided. It helps. As we walked, we often paused to admire the beauties of the flower beds around us. The blending of colour enchanted us and reminded me of the robes of the angels in the great procession. The fragrance stealing upon us was as subtle and strong as incense, and we breathed it gratefully. "What is this place?" asked Janet dreamily, bending over an unknown flower. "It is the Garden of Desire." "Oh," we cried out simultaneously. I did not know why at the time, but its very name thrilled me with the keenest enjoyment. "What a lovely name," Janet said. "How did it come by its title?" "Follow me," said our angel, "and you shall see." He led us off to the left, where the flowers gave place to bushes, and these to young trees. Gradually we realized that we were entering a wood, for the trees became thicker and taller until they shut out some of the light. We walked softly over the grassy earth, wondering greatly what we would see, and presently we came to a glade, open and bright, where the light streamed through in wide slanting beams. Seated with his back against the trunk of a tree was an angel. He did not look up as we approached, but remained stooping over something on his knee. I saw it was a large book, so lovely in appearance that I yearned to handle it. It appeared to be bound in crimson leather with gold tooling upon it, and the edges gleamed in a deep red gold. Our guide signed to us to be seated, and then he too sat with his back against a tree. "Greetings," he said to the angel student. The angel glanced up from his book without surprise. He put his finger into the place in the most natural manner, then closing it, looked up with us to a smile. "Greetings. Welcome to the Garden of Desire, Bernard and Janet." He had such a pleasant face that we felt at home with him at once. Boldly I said, "That book fascinates me. I thought there were no books in heaven's realm." "No ever-existing books," corrected our new friend. "But that volume looks as though it could have endured forever," Janet put in wonderingly. "It would vanish with a breath." "Then is it—" I began in dismay. "No, it's not an illusion," interrupted the angel, smiling towards our guide. "It is a real book." I sighed with relief, and both angels laughed. "You have not yet recovered from your deep teaching," our dear guide explained. "Do try to remember that all this is real." "Yes, I will." "And I," Janet added. "But tell us why you said the book would vanish with a breath." "What does the Holy Book say?" said the angel student. "Thou takest away their breath, they die and return to their dust. Thou sendest forth thy spirit, they are created, and thou renewest the face of the earth." He must have seen our puzzlement, for he leaned upon his book and began to teach us. 4. The teaching of the angel student. Now all around us in this spacious heaven world are myriads of cells, invisible to our eyes. When we desire anything, as for instance this volume, we first raise our hearts to the Great Father, asking that his light may infuse the cells. Now this prayer is not an ordinary one, as of a man speaking spontaneously to the Lord, but has a certain form, certain actions of the hands and certain words. Only angels and those on the higher planes can pronounce this prayer. When they do so, the Father's light pours down into the cells and they become visible. He paused and looked at us questioningly to see if we could follow him. So I asked, "Do you mean it is like air striking a cold surface and becoming visible in the form of vapour?" "Something like that," he agreed. "These visible cells are filled with light so that they can take on the appearance of a dazzling colour, and because they are in constant motion, the colours change." "Is that the stuff of which Stephen spoke?" Janet asked in amazement, and I must confess I was also astonished, for I had not seen the least where this was leading. "It is indeed the stuff of the lower planes," agreed our teacher. "We angels often call down the Father's light into cells that are invisibly teeming around the planes. When the stuff becomes visible, we sometimes leave it for those with creative gifts to work upon." "Then that is how Stephen formed his peach," Janet murmured. "Not the forming of it, but the matter of it," corrected the angel. "The next process is the desire picture in the mind. Without this, nothing can be made, for it is, as it were, the mould which shapes the creative stuff. In every creation, both great and small, there must first be an image in the mind, remember. The great musician creates his masterpiece within himself before he writes a note. The small boy creates a toy within himself before he begins to whittle with his knife upon a shapeless piece of wood." God created man in his own image, I quoted slowly. Can it be? Yes, said our teacher, and we were silent in reverent awe. Presently he continued, when we have created our desire picture in the mind, we are ready for the rest of the work. Now this garden, he paused to look around appreciatively, is the product of the desire thought of a man who was a great gardener on earth. On the lower plane he worked in the Hall of Gardens. Then one day he found himself free of his higher plane, and so he brought forth all of this beauty from his mind. Then he made this place? Janet demanded. Oh no, said our angel teacher. He had the thought desire in his mind. That is why we call this the Garden of Desire. And of course, in one sense, all heaven is a garden of desire. But he could only have the image of it. It came into being of and by the power of the Father. I remember now, I interrupted, how Stephen insisted that he had not created his peach. He said, though, that the Father had given him the picture first. Even our beautiful mind pictures spring from him, said the angel solemnly. We owe all to him, you see. Now when we have our picture clearly and the creative stuff is shimmering all around us in its beauty, we begin to breathe deeply and slowly with a wordless heart call to the Father, that we may absorb a great current of his life breath, which is the air of heaven's realm. When we breathe forth this in-breathed power upon the light cells, and they take the form of our mind picture, they exist. How wonderful, I murmured. Yes, it is all his, said our teacher. His inspiration, his power, his life breath. We receive his inspiration, we breathe in his power. Then comes the expiration, we breathe out his power. But in an expiration of his power, the light cells receive the inspiration or the in-breathing and expire, or return to their original form, only when we withdraw the breath from them. Thus life is a continuous breathing, an in-breathing of the Father's life power and an out-breathing of that power in the form of our mind pictures. Even life on earth is like this in the lower degree. Men breathe in the Father's life breath, then they form pictures in their minds of what they desire to do, speak, make, or work. Then they breathe out the life breath in action. Without it they would have no power to act, for they would have no life. Thou takest away their breath, they die and return to dust. Thou sendest forth thy spirit, they are created. It is the rhythm of life. It's all so amazing, Janet exclaimed, yet so obvious when you're shown. Yes, agreed our teacher. Men have the knowledge there all the time. Why, even an ordinary dictionary of earth could have told you that inspiration means to breathe in, to arouse, to create a feeling or thought, and that expiration means to breathe out, to come to an end, to die. When I said this volume would vanish with a breath, I spoke truly, you see. How was that? I asked. I was beginning to understand, but I wanted it put more clearly. When I withdrew the life breath from my thought form, it came to an end, dissolves into its separate cells again. What of Stephen's peach? He said that when he had perfected, the Father would give it everlasting life. Because it pleased the Father, because the Father saw that it was good, he alone has power to hold his life breath in anything for eternity. The very universe is held in being by his life breath. The very stars would fall from the sky but for his power. Truly, in him we live and move and have our being. For each one, from the smallest insect to the highest angel, is dependent upon him for every breath. Yet men of earth so often forget him, said our angel guide. We turned to look at him in surprise, for we had been so intent on our lesson that we had forgotten his presence. Men will awake, the angel student replied confidently. He was about to return to his book, so I hastened to put a further question. 5. Desire stuff. Is the story in the book part of our mind picture too? He looked up again, smiling. This time he entirely closed the volume as though he had thought he would have no chance to study it for a long while. No, this story is kept in the records of the Hall of Books, on the lower planes. When a man desires a book, he wills it to him by desire. Then the book tells itself to him in his mind. Arthur explained that, I said. Yes, here we draw the invisible matter of the book and imprint it on the blank pages of our created volume. Of course, if we will, we may imprint our own story. As my children have had so much theory, said our guide, will you give them some practical instruction too? Most certainly. And now the angel student put away his book altogether, but we knew he did not mind, for he was smiling. What would you like to work upon? Asked our guide. Do you want to make some stars or a new moon for the baby angels? Is that how they were made? Janet asked delightedly. Of course, but that was only a laughing suggestion. What would you like to make? Janet's mind mingled with mine, and we held a rapid, thought, though voiceless, consultation. A book like the angel students, she said at last, but with blue covers and plain gilt edges. And you? Our guide turned to me. I want to make a story for the book, all about the Father's love. It will tell of people on many planes from the lowest to quite a high plane, showing how the desires of their hearts have been fulfilled. And for its title I shall choose that lovely saying, Heaven is fulfillment. How ambitious, smiled the angel student. You will first have to all visit these people and all the planes before you can even begin your story. Then I will. The two angels exchanged a smile, and I thought at first I was going to be asked to make another choice. Then our guide said, Very well. Let us deal with Janet's desire, and then you can both come back for your fulfillment when you are ready. Now, he said briskly, I want you both to sit down and think clearly of the volume you wish to form. When you have finished the desire stuff, we'll be ready. We began at once, and as we concentrated on the beautiful volume, I was dimly aware that both angels were standing, occasionally lifting their hands and making other gestures of great reverence and beauty. I knew that they were asking the Father to send his light into the invisible cells around us, and I longed to watch, but I knew that this was forbidden. Obediently, I bent my attention to the inward picture, and the book began to take shape more clearly in my mind. I knew that this was so, also with Janet, for she pressed wordlessly upon me that she wished for gilt edges and not red gold. Suddenly, a great sound rang out into the air. It sounded like one word, although it may have been many, pronounced rapidly. Both the angels cried it aloud together, and when, startled, we looked up, we were surrounded by a living rainbow. That is what it seemed at first sight. It was glorious. The stuff clothed the trunk of every tree and hung from all the boughs. It shimmered on the blades of grass and piled up in sparkling array on every side. It was constantly changing and moving. Its colours were of that breathtaking splendour that I had seen before, not one shade remaining the same, but each giving place to another, and the whole filled with a blazing, fiery glow. We feasted our eyes upon it for a long time. The two angels knelt and drew their wings as a screen around them. The enchanted wood was our heaven for the time. Presently the angels arose and asked us of our picture if it was completed. Yes, said Janet. Then they began to teach us how to breathe and how to pray, breathing and praying with us. I do not know how long a time was passed in this way, but at last, to our inexpressible delight, the volume lay in Janet's hands. How eagerly we looked at it and handled it. The cover had the appearance of the finest leather and was of a rich blue, tooled in gold in the exact design we had visualized. The edges gleamed, the paper was thick and shiny so that it reflected the light. Reverently we passed it from one to another. Our thought, whispered Janet. His power. How I am longing to imprint my story upon it, I answered, smoothing the pages with a loving finger. Presently we remembered to thank the angels. We put the book down and went to them, and they instantly uncovered their faces to smile at us. How sympathetic they were. It is always a joy to know the unfolding of powers, said our guide. Do you not know a baby's pleasure in its first faltering steps, or a kitten's when it first opens its eyes on a wonderful world? Look, said the student angel. He has vanished with a breath. We turned and our volume had gone. Oh, our beautiful book, Janet cried regretfully, but the angel comforted us. It awaits you in the unseen, never fear. When Bernard and Janet return with the story, it shall be visible in a moment of time. What of your book? Janet asked, pointing to the volume on the grass. Will it, too, disappear? Yes, when I have finished my studies, explained the angel. Then I shall withdraw the life breath, the volume will return to its original cells, and the story will return to the hall of books. Once more he lifted the book, found the place and slipped his finger into it. Then, with a smiling farewell, he returned to his interrupted studies. As we walked back through the wood, from which the stuff had now quite melted away, our guide gave us a searching glance. Happy? He asked. Janet answered for both. Oh, Angel dear, thank you for everything. 6. The narrow way. After we had walked for a while, we crossed the lawn set about with shapely bushes, having tapering tops and casting deep shadows on the ground. In the midst of this lawn was a well, where we paused to drink of the water from its cool depths. As we rested on the stone edge, drinking from tiny cups the angel gave us, he said that this was called the well of water of life, and that to drink from it was to preserve the doubled power. Why do angels drink of it too? Janet asked, watching our guide sipping from the cup. We too need constantly to feed upon the Father's power, he explained. We thus renew our youth perpetually. Is this the way? I queried, looking reverently at the water in my cup. It's not the only way, there are others, but you will hear more of this subject later on. As I sipped the crystal liquid, I felt delightfully invigorated. A keen desire for further adventure crept upon me, and I noticed Janet's eyes shone brightly as they met mine. Presently the angel rose, and we followed him across the lawn and into another wood. Here there was a narrow pathway edged with golden bracken. The trees rise out of it like reapers knee-deep in corn. The great boughs swept down, decked with leaves, blossom and fruit in a mingled abundance, as though every season lived as one in this eternity. As we walked, brilliant birds leaned down to peer at us, and tinier ones of every hue alighted on our shoulders. The singing of all these feathered ones mingled in an exquisite psalm of joy. Truly, the time of the singing of birds had come, I murmured to Janet, and she, turning to our guide, said, I thought birds were only on the lower planes. They have the freedom of the realm, he explained. Of all the lesser brethren, they are the purest, and so we never lose our sight of them. As we walked on, the space between the trees widened so that we could glimpse an expanse of open, hilly countryside on either side. There was a faint chill in the air which lent a particular joy to breathing. I took deeper breaths, looking up to the grey clouds beyond the tree-tops. Soon the wood had been left behind. Our steps still followed the narrow path, but now on either side a steep bank sloped down. This gradually deepened so that we were walking up, high on the pathway. It appeared to have narrowed still more, but our guide said this was not so. Have no fear, he enjoined us. Keep your eyes on the path. Concentrate upon it and you will walk in safety. We obeyed him, Janet close behind the angel and I following, and in this way we covered a great distance. The banks on either side had now reached the proportions of a mountainside, and our pathway seemed perched on a dizzy height. As our guide had promised, however, we made our way in perfect safety. Concentrating upon the pathway made us feel drowsy, but with it came a sense of deep peace. At last we stepped onto a field, curiously flat and featureless. It seemed to stretch away into an immeasurable distance without sign of a hill, tree, or wood. Turning, we looked at the pathway over which we had come. It looked a mere thread thrown carelessly on the top of the mountain range, and we marvelled to think that we had experienced no fear. What is it? I asked. Our guide stood beside us, following our searching gaze. It is the causeway of consciousness. We both cried out in delight at this. What a lovely name, Janet added. Names are very important in heaven, our angel said. They are a part of the music of it all. Harmony and beauty are ever present. How do they come by their names? I asked, feeling that I was not making myself very clear, but knowing of old that the angel would understand. They always understood. That was the joy of it. Names come from the outflowing thought of heaven's realm, he said. When the angels look upon the loveliness of the Father's creation, their delight in it and their praise of him seem to unite. Of this union is born a name. Do you remember how Adam named all the living creatures that the Lord had made? It's like that. He sat down in silence when he had finished speaking, and we settled ourselves beside him. Together we looked out over the hills to the far horizon where the summits seemed to touch the dark clouds. Presently he turned to us and smiled as though to say, "Now you may ask me anything you like." We took instant advantage of it, for we both cried in one breath, "Do tell us about the causeway of consciousness." 7. The causeway of consciousness. Just as you needed to concentrate upon the narrow pathway, our angel began, so those who cross the causeway need to concentrate upon their way. The causeway of consciousness is the link by which we pass from one plane to another, as I have previously explained. Thus you could go from here, without moving the body in which you are functioning at present, to many of the planes that are lower than this, or you could from this field climb higher to other planes beyond this one. Has this field any name? I asked, glancing behind me at the featureless plane. Yes, it is called the broad field. Here it is possible to leave behind the present body when climbing to higher states, or to draw from existing self sufficient matter for a new body in which to descend to the lower states. These bodies are like the luggage of a long earth journey and suggest a broad platform in contrast to the narrow track. Janet and I looked around involuntarily at the empty field. Where are the bodies that have been left behind? I spoke for both. Our angel laughed. It is difficult indeed to give wisdom to babes. In stating one fact alone there is so much adhering to it, so many shades of understanding. He paused and continued. Here again it is something like an earth journey. As the train speeds over the narrow track, the passenger sees one station after another flash past. Here in heaven we see truth in its entirety, so that all the stations or facts are visible to us at once. Then when we begin to explain, we have to mention one fact at a time, with the result that at times a ludicrous impression is given. It is so very foolish to expect to see the discarded bodies in the field, Janet asked, smiling at our dear teacher. But all he had said so tender and kind that we could not be offended at his mirth. It is indeed. Can you picture the broad field under these circumstances? It would be somewhat strange, I agreed. What happens to the bodies then? They are but cloaks which are discarded on the way, said the angel, as though a man of earth threw off his heavy clothing as summer advanced, or took upon himself more garments with the approach of winter. Think of the higher planes as the summer and the lower planes as the winter, and you will more readily understand. Now, just as your book vanished with a breath, as the angel student said, so do the bodies, or cloaks, that are discarded. They return to the original cells from which they came. Then just as your volume will be ready for you the instant you want it by simply drawing the invisible cells into the mould of your thought picture, so will your cloak be ready when you return. Do you mean, I gasped, that we continually make our own bodies here? Yeah, just as a man builds himself a car or an aeroplane before he makes his journeys of earth, or causes an expert to build them for him, bodies are vehicles too, remember. We were so amazed at this that we were silent, turning it over in our minds. At last Janet said, Is that why the angel student taught us? Yes, smiled our teacher. You see, you were nearly ready to be made free of some of the planes. Yet we have travelled before, I pointed out. Did I not speak of experts of earth who build vehicles for the travels of men? This is the work of many angels in heaven. They build the vehicle bodies for the younger ones of the realm to travel in. Yes, we did not know, I marvelled. We thought we were travelling alone for much of the way. Our angel's eyes twinkled as he said gravely, There are still some things you do not know. It seems to me, I commented, that it is almost everything that we do not know. Remember my simile of the journey, said our teacher. We angels see all the stations at once, but you see first one station, then two at a time, and so on as you advance. Do men ever attain the complete vision of the angels? Janet asked. Now, there again it is difficult to reply clearly. Angels too are in graded order, so that some see much more than others. But I have heard, and here his voice took on a great solemnity, that some of the great ones among men see quite as clearly as some of the holy ones among the angels. Indeed, they see more clearly in some respects, since men have had the experience of earth life. We fell into silence again, musing on the stupendous nature of the growth of heaven. Absorbing the angel's thought, I reflected that it was like a spiral, so that we circled the whole of the lowest plane and then, without breaking the continuity of eternal life, rose up to the next plane, and so to the next and the next. What a vast prospect it was, and yet far from discouraging us with the sense of our littleness, for Janet too was thinking on these lines, it seemed to fill us with the peace of security, like a house on a firm foundation, inspiring the certainty of endurance. We felt too that with our growth came an ever closer drawing to our Lord, for although for a long time we had not seen him, as it were, bodily, yet we never ceased now to see him in our secret inwardness. It was as though he held us constantly to his heart, communing with and encouraging us always. This did not take away from our delight in seeing him, walking in heaven's realm, but simply gave us the promise of greater joys forever in store. As we sat in meditation, the grey clouds above the distant hills had grown darker and the light was fading. With it, we seemed to sink into a drowsiness which neither wished to disturb. We had no more any idea of the passing of time, nor any sense of monotony. We might have rested there for the space of an earth hour or for centuries of time. It was all one to us. We were content. Presently our angel's voice came faintly to our ears, as though he was speaking on a mere breath. Children, I have now given you all the knowledge you need to make you free of some of the lower planes. Henceforth you may travel in those planes as you will. Then, with a sense of surprise, I realized that he had been teaching us all the time, and that we knew how to create and discard our cloaks, and how to travel to the winter end and to the summer zones. It all seemed so simple and natural that I marvelled we had not known before. Janet, too, held her knowledge placidly, as though it was an insignificant fact that had been casually mentioned in her presence. Once more I realized the extremely gradual growth of the realm, and loved the peace of it. See that you speak of this to no man, cautioned our guide, but each is made free of the planes when he is ready. Leaning towards us, he touched us each on the lips, murmuring, "Receive the seal." And then we knew that we should never speak thoughtlessly of the precious secret. At first I thought the seal was only a symbol, but happening to glance down, I perceived that our brown robes were now crossed on the breast with silver bands, and that they were held in place with a round bronze seal. 8. An experiment. Now, where would you like to travel? Asked the angel. It is an unpleasant sensation at first, I asked doubtfully. Why, you have experienced it many, many times without even knowing, our teacher assured us, and so we fell to talking, Janet and I, deciding where we should go. Suddenly I remembered Marie, who had been my very first friend in Heaven's Realm. I sent out a quick mind message to her, asking her if she would like me to come. It happened that her mental vow was drawn, but Isabel received it, and she quickly told her companion. In a moment came a hearty invitation from the Hall of Children. Janet was delighted with this arrangement, so we quickly composed ourselves as we had been shown. Standing, we clasped hands, said farewell to our angel, and then directed our wills. We had been looking towards the causeway, which was scarcely visible in the half-light. Now, as we watched, the focus of our vision changed. The scene before us grew blurred. The light grew brighter and brighter. At the same time, a sense of lightness came upon our bodies, followed immediately by a feeling of suddenly increased weight. We felt as though we were travelling rapidly downwards in a lift, and yet this was by no means unpleasant. I was reminded of the birds which swooped down from great heights to the surface of the sea, and felt something of their exultation. All this occupied no more than a flash, while the light steadily grew brighter. Then, as our vision cleared, we saw that the causeway had become a path through a vast parkland, and that children were romping around our feet. "This reminds me of the baby's angel's playground," said Janet, looking around with keen enjoyment. "Yes, only these infants are not quite so plump. I expect some of those baby angels were the little earth guides of those children. I wonder if they have ever met." "Why not ask them?" Janet suggested. I sat on the grass looking invitingly at a small boy about 3. He had great eyes and tiny claws and a very wide smile. Before I could speak, he had pushed me backwards with one bound and was astride my chest. "You're a horse," he declared, bouncing up and down. "I'm going to ride a long way." I looked up into the great eyes. "What is your name?" "Sammy. I know what yours is." "You do?" "Yes, it's Friend." "No, my name is Bernard." The child stopped bouncing to look at me wonderingly. "It is Friend," he insisted. "My heaven mummy said everyone is a friend here." "Of course," I said hastily. I stole a glance at Janet. She was sitting quietly beside us, and she pressed upon my mind what to say. "Tell me about your heaven mummy." "Oh, she's lovely," he cried, his eyes shining. "When I came here I wanted my earth mummy. I looked everywhere for her, but of course she wasn't here because this is heaven. Did you know that this is heaven?" "Yes." Janet and I exchanged a quick smile. "Go on, Sammy." "Well, I did not know that this was heaven when I first came. Then a lady came and sat beside me, and she seemed to know what I wanted without me telling her anything at all. She said that heaven was like a big sky at night, all shiny with stars, and the earth was like the room with the blind down just before you went to sleep." "That was lovely, Sammy," Janet murmured, and he went on, accompanying his words with a bounce. "That is why I couldn't see my mummy, because the blind was down. But in the night when she was fast asleep," and here his voice dropped to a mysterious whisper, "my little angel flew down and drew the blind. Then he took my hand and flew right up to the stars with her. That's why I'm not lonely for her anymore. I see her often." "Well, you are a lucky little boy," I commented, "having 2 mummies." "I am lucky because I am in heaven," he said solemnly. "All the day my heaven mummy loves me too. She plays with me and gives me things I want to eat and answers all my questions. That's what I call loving." "A very good description too," I agreed, and Janet asked, "Are there a lot of friends here?" "Oh yes," said the child, taking a fistful of my hair to act as a rein. "All the big people are called friend, except for your own heaven mummy. Some of them play with us and some teach us, but best of all is our Jesus friend." He looked as though he was about to say more, but in a moment his rosy lips closed into a smile. Dreamily he gazed away over my head. His bouncing ceased, his fingers fell from my hair. Looking at his rapt expression, we scarcely dared to breathe. How dear he must be to his Jesus friend. All this time the other children were playing nearby. They had been rolling on the grass, and their merry laughter rang out constantly. In the distance we saw other groups, one small crowd enjoying a splash in the lake. It was so pleasant that we thought we could stay here forever. Presently we heard some quick steps on the grass. "Bernard!" cried Marie's glad voice. I rolled over, tumbling Sammy into Janet's lap. In a moment I had Marie's hands in mine, and we were exchanging a joyful smile. She was robed in golden yellow, and her sash was almost of bronze hue. "What?" I cried. "Have you met the one?" "Yes, my friend, and you brought her to me. Isabel and I are to walk together for all eternity." Her joy was so great that I could do nothing else but take her to Janet and be hugged. They made friends instantly, and who could have resisted Marie's radiance then? In a few moments Isabel appeared, and she, too, came in for her share of congratulation. We were a very happy group as we talked over our adventures in this land of endless joy. "I see you have met my heaven son," Marie said at last, nodding towards Sammy. "Your heaven son?" I queried, gazing at the little fellow. He had fallen asleep with some daisies in his hand, his dark lashes curling on the lightly flushed cheek. "He's a lovely child," Janet said softly. "And you only know this little part of him?" Marie exclaimed. "He is our treasure, is he not, Isabel?" "Yes," Isabel dropped to her knees beside him, softly stroking his curls. "We count it a great privilege to have the care of him. His mother idolised him before he died. Indeed, she thought of little else and had no interest at all in religion. Since she has been meeting him in sleep, however, she has grown nearer and nearer to the eternal truth. Of course, she remembers no details when she wakes, but the impression remains. He talks to her of his Jesus friends. "Shall you remain here a long time?" I asked. "Only until Sammy's mother comes," Marie explained. "Neither know it yet, but they will be together very soon." The mother's earth life was drawing to its end, but she had only earned a place on one of the lower planes. Sammy would have been out of her reach, but because she had not brought him up to know the King of Love by reading to him books that she herself did not understand, he gave her her reward. Sammy was sent on in front to be a little messenger to tell her all about his Jesus friend. Now she is almost ready, and when she comes, the first one to greet her will be her little son. We sat talking for a long while, and our hearts were full of praise of our beloved. Presently, without being aware of any sound or movement, I knew that he was in the hall, coming towards us across the park. I turned to awaken Sammy, but his eyes were opened wide. "It is my Jesus friend," he said in an erupted whisper. Springing up, he raced off over the grass. We saw the beloved figure come into view, open his arms and enfold the boy. There was a long pause. Then they came to us together. Sammy was holding his hand and looking up adoringly. We had all made to rise, but our beloved signed us to remain where we were. Quietly he came and sat in our midst with the child on his knee. Without saying one word, he looked at each of us with such tenderness and such infinite giving that we knew not how to hold our joy. We all pressed towards him, touching his robe, filling our eyes and hearts with the sight of our King. In all that long, joyous time, no one word was uttered, yet he seemed to have communed with us unceasingly, and each had much to treasure in his memory. When at last he rose to go, he once more signed us to remain. Then he put Sammy into his Heaven Mother's arms, blessed us, and went on his way back across the park. "It gives me no pain now to see him go," Marie murmured at last. "Is he not ever with us in our hearts?" When we sat with them, the light drew dim. Then the focus of our vision changed, and turning, we beheld our angel guide. "So you have returned from your first journey." 9. Secret of Joy. We were thrilled with our experiment and poured out all the details to our dear teacher. He listened attentively, and when we had finished, he asked us once more where we would like to go. "Why, may we travel again already?" I asked in surprise. "You are going to travel a great deal," he assured us. Then he went on to explain that since we had been made free of the planes, we must use our new powers in order to make them forever our own. "You must choose our next visit," I told Janet. She at once decided to look up Rose and Greg, so we sent out messages to them. Very soon we were with them in the Hall of Books. Reg was our next choice, but we found it difficult to reach him with a mind message. "Where can he be?" said Janet. "He must have his mental veil very firmly drawn." "I wonder whether we can get a message to him by Robbie," I suggested. We began to concentrate again while our angel sat silently beside us. Presently Janet touched my hand. We had contacted Robbie together. He replied to our inquiries happily, and even across the vast distance we sensed his especial joy. It appeared that he and Reg were together in the Hall of Audience, and that they had just returned from the plane between, where they had been united for eternity. "Reg and Robbie," Janet cried gaily. "I never guessed. Did you, Bernard?" "No, but what wonderful news. I remember how happy they were in the Hall of Adventure when they wrestled together on that rock. No wonder Reg did not receive our mind message, though, since they have just arrived in the Hall of Audience." "Can we go there at once?" Janet asked longingly. "We are sure to see our King of Love there." "Janet," I interrupted, "I have a great suggestion to make. Suppose we visit those planes where he is. Suppose we follow him from hall to hall. Would you like that?" She turned with radiant face to our angel, who had been listening with a smile to our talk. "May we, dear angel?" "Of course, children. Remember, the Master never sleeps. That is the secret of our joy in heaven's realm. Once we have learned how to travel, how to function on all our different bodies, we may follow him all the time, never letting him out of our sight, as it were." Really? Janet's face glowed with happiness. Oh, Angel, I have felt a little bit sorry sometimes when he has left us, to think that we may follow him wherever he goes. Not quite that, little ones, our angel corrected tenderly, for you are only made free of the lower planes as yet. However, he is often there. Then we will be there too, I declared. How shall we know where to go? I will direct you, he promised. I have been with him constantly while sitting here in the broad field. I have very rarely let him out of my sight. Oh, we cried out in one breath and drew closer to our dear guide. Sometimes his homeliness blinded us to his grandeur. At other times a chance remark revealed him, and we longed to bask in his benediction ray. To be with our King so often, constantly communing with him, knowing where he was, what he was saying and doing, to be able to sit in a field meditation and yet follow the beloved through the plains, how exalted he was. Children, he chided us, breaking in on our thoughts, I am but of the fourth order. Do not be so awed. There, come and draw close to me within my arm, and we will rest a while and talk of our King. One on either side, we pressed against him, and he put his arms around our shoulders. Then, while we looked out over the causeway to the distant hills, he followed the master with his inward sight, which is not quite the same, he explained, as functioning in another body and walking with him, and he told us what he saw. A long time passed in this way, and then our teacher sent us off to meet Reg and Robbie in the Hall of Audience, and when we returned very happily from this visit, he directed us to many other planes. How busy we were! We soon became quite accustomed to the donning of cloaks for winter regions and the discarding of them for summer visits. It seemed incredible to us that we had not known, that we had thought of heaven as a number of distant places instead of a here and now, as the angel said. In all our wanderings we met our beloved King, but the visit that gave us the greatest joy was the one into the haven of prayer. Here, on the fringe of the forest, we walked by his side, and here he explained many wonderful things to us, revealing to us also the full significance of our bronze seals. He told us that these would be later replaced by silver ones, and later still by gold. Then he called to our minds the presentation of the flowers of purity, telling us that those who had flower growing in the garden of the Lord would one day find it fastened beneath the golden seal. Many more things he told us during that walk in the forest, and when at last he dismissed us, we went with light hearts, knowing that we would often follow him through the plains. He knew it too. He smiled at us and murmured, "A little while." 10. The freedom of the stars. When we came to ourselves in the broad field, our angel was sitting beside us with his wings drawn around his head. We sat in silence, for we knew that he was in meditation. Janet and I had much to occupy our thoughts. We went over all our meetings with our King, repeating to ourselves all he had said. When therefore our angel began to speak, he merely continued our thoughts. "A little while," he murmured, quoting from the earth words of the Lord which endure forever in heaven's realm. "And ye shall not see me, and again a little while, and ye shall see me, because I go to the Father. I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh from you." "Is it so with the angels too?" I asked softly. "Yes," he answered, very low. "We of the lower orders cannot follow him everywhere, for we are not free of the higher planes, as those of the exalted order of angels. Thus it is that he speaks into our hearts also, saying, 'A little while, and ye shall not see me, and again a little while, and ye shall see me, because I go to the Father.' It is then, when he goes to the Father, uniting with and merging with the might of him, that we cannot follow." Suddenly I remembered our talk in the plain between. I pressed my thought into Janet's mind, and she answered me by asking, "Is that what is meant by the wonderful text, 'The King of Kings and Lord of Lords, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen nor can see'?" "It is even so." There was a reverent pause. Then he added, "If we of the lower order of angels cannot reach him, how can men?" "Yet in an exalted order of angels," I broke off, not daring to voice my question, but our teacher understood. "We do not know," he whispered. "Sometimes they go from us, but when they return we dare not look into their faces because of the brilliance of light revealed. Veiling our eyes, our lips are also sealed. It is too holy, even for angel speech." Presently, Janet ventured, "You can follow him a long way?" Our guide smiled then, in that tender, giving way of our king. "Yes, I enjoy the freedom of the stars. Quite apart from my journeyings in the planes which interpenetrate one another, and which may be reached by the causeway of consciousness, I can travel as I will among the stars and planets." "Those very stars and planets we saw from Earth?" I broke in amazedly. "You glimpsed but a small minority of them. Far beyond Earth and all the lower planes of heaven, a vast expanse of voids is broken here and there by spheres unknown to men." "Does he visit them?" Janet asked. "Did he not create them? All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made." "Yes, he is ever careful of that which is his." "Who dwells on these unknown spheres?" I queried. "Do tell us about them." Our guide laughed deeply then. "All about them?" he echoed. "If one were to do that, all eternity would not be sufficient. Besides, I too have not learned more than a drop of the vast ocean of knowledge concerning the spheres." "Then tell us a little," Janet pleaded. "I will do more than this, children. Have you not followed him through the lower planes? I will take you under my wings. You too shall enjoy for a while the freedom of the stars." We were so amazed and thrilled by this prospect that we could do nothing but gaze wordlessly at our angel guide. He looked deeply into our eyes, and now familiar drowsiness began to creep upon us. The light seemed to grow dim, the causeway to drop swiftly out of sight. A strange whirling sensation filled my mind. Presently I became aware that I held to the angel's side, that his left wing overshadowed me. I knew that Janet was on his right side, and for a time I rested in peaceful security. When at last I opened my eyes, it was dark. At least it seemed so at first, but gradually my vision grew accustomed to it, and I could see. Below us an occasional glow lit the void. It was strange to be looking down on them instead of upwards to the stars. "Those are some of the spheres we have already passed," explained our guide. "Then we must have been travelling for a long time?" Janet asked. "Yes," was all he said. Far to our left, another great sphere shone out of the void, and above us we saw a host of them, some seeming to be quite near, others mere points of light in an immeasurable distance away. From time to time chariots of angels passed us, some looking like falling stars, others like a streak of brilliant flame. All this time we had no sense of movement, but the angels said we were travelling rapidly. He explained that we could not realize it because there was nothing nearby with which to measure our speed, but that when we drew near to one of the spheres we would see how rapidly it appeared to grow larger. Once a chariot of many angels passed close to us, and then it was no more than a lightning flash. "We are moving just as swiftly as they," our angel said. "Can you tell us the name of any of the spheres?" I asked. "If I did, you would hear nothing." "They are named in the heavenly language, then?" "They are like our own names. For most of these spheres are inhabited by our higher orders. Men who come to the lower planes of heaven see only angels who have contact with men, and they think those are all. However, there are higher orders who never contact men at all, even the highest of them." "What do they do?" asked Janet. "It is not necessary to do, but to be. How hard it is for men to realize that. Those great ones exist in the power of the Father, absorbing his light and pouring it upon us." "Upon men?" I interrupted. "No, upon the angels who are of a lower order. We lesser ones, lesser brethren, if you like," he broke off, smiling down at us, "visit these spheres to bask in the benediction ray of the great ones." "Just as we men bask in your benediction ray," said Janet. "Yes, we consult the higher orders too concerning life on the lower planes, and they give us of their wisdom." His voice died away, and we felt a thrill pass through his arms. Looking up, we suddenly saw a great light appear in the void, growing rapidly larger. It sent out such piercing rays that they seemed to light up the vast pathway in all directions. The luminous shining of a distant sphere grew pale in comparison. A passing chariot of angels were revealed in every line and detail. Brighter grew the light until Janet and I tried to cover our eyes, but the angel stopped us. "I will veil you." Swiftly he drew some portions from the neck of his robe and bound it around our foreheads, so that a thin covering drooped over our faces. Instantly the glare of the light was made less, and we were able to look about us once more. The great shining had come to rest behind a far-off sphere, bathing in its radiance. It was a wonderful sight. The sphere glowed like fire while the beams of light cut through vast tracts of surrounding darkness. "What is it?" I whispered at last. "Children," our angel murmured, "you are blessed indeed. The king has gone to visit the paradise of saints." "Then it is not an angel sphere?" Janet asked. "No, it is used by some of the holy ones among men. You little ones may not enter, but I will take you near so that you may behold a little of its glory." Tightening his hold upon us, he winged his way towards the great shining. 11. The Paradise of Saints. Presently we were aware that our movement had ceased. Our angel was poised a little above the sphere, holding us to his sides. He gazed steadily into the great light without anything to veil his eyes, and I thought that angel sight must be adapted for such radiance. True, our eyes were covered with a portion of our guide's robe, but even then we seemed to be so bathed in flaming splendour that every pore and cell and vein was saturated with it. There was a curious quality about it too. At first I could not define it, and then Janet pressed it into my mind. It was the quality of bliss. Such joy, contentment, and satisfaction poured from the sphere that my heart thrilled to it. I seemed to break forth into a great singing that went ringing through the void. But whether this was so or not, I cannot say. Heaven is fulfillment, our angel reminded us. That is the theme of this great happiness. Heaven fulfills the highest aspirations of all. The saints differ from men in that they have higher aspirations, hence greater fulfillment. "Is that all the difference between the saints and ordinary men?" I asked in amazement. "Yes," our guide assured us. "The saints aimed higher from the moment of their dawning reason on earth. True, there are many who have exalted wishes, but this is like a man who drives a carriage and hopes that the horse will take the right path. The wise man takes a firm hold of the reins and so guides the horse into the road he chooses himself. This is the way of saints as compared with the ways of men." "Do the saints always remain here?" Janet asked. "Oh no, they have the freedom of all the planes of heaven's realm. Some of them remain on the higher planes, others veil themselves and mingle with the men of the lower planes in order to teach them. All live a life of great power and happiness, but inevitably there comes a time when their highest aspirations draw them to fulfillment, which can alone be accomplished in this paradise." As the angel spoke, the light that had come to rest behind the sphere began gradually to enter into it. We watched the great shining withdraw from the void, so that the sphere began to glow with even greater splendour. When the light had entered wholly into the sphere, there burst forth such a power of joy that my heart could scarcely contain it. A strong fragrance stole up to us like the incense of 1,000,000 flowers at eventide. Simultaneously came the rolling notes of a great organ, throbbing in ecstasy, filling the outermost regions of the void. Then, while we gazed spellbound, a mighty figure appeared within the radiance. It filled all that we could see of the great sphere, the outstretched hands touching east and west, the head and feet reaching to north and south. So luminous was this mighty figure that it threw a shadow behind it, and this shadow was the shadow of the cross. Upon the palms of the hands, the insteps of the feet, and over the region of the heart were gaping wounds. But these wounds were most beautiful to look upon. Like rivers cleaving the tree-clothed valleys, they gleamed in surpassing splendour, and from them poured out torrents of sweetness, of wisdom and comfort beyond all comprehension. Around the forehead was a crown of crimson roses, and then I knew that the fragrance had stole forth from this mighty crown, and the beauty of the organ was the music of his voice. "Come unto me, all that labour and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Oh, the tenderness, the drawing power of those glorious words. My whole being answered them. I dared to look into his eyes, and what I saw there thrilled me with rapture. Master, my Lord, my King, my God, I cried in my spirit, and I drew nearer and nearer to him until his arms enfolded me and I leant upon that mighty heart of love. Never have I known such bliss, such glory, such an absorbing of knowledge, for now I knew that when he spoke of labour, he meant that all striving towards perfection from the earliest day on earth to the highest attainment in eternity. And when he spoke of the heavy laden, he referred to all the burdens of ignorance, of not knowing, that men held and gradually discarded on their way towards the heights. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Then I knew that heaven life was but a continuation of earth life in its growth, that to grow in knowing was the meaning of all life from its humblest form to its highest achievement. Come unto me. Ah, so this was heaven, to come to our King, to grow in a knowing of his love, to come nearer and nearer to that which he is. Strongly the angels held us to his side. All at once I found myself looking down on the splendour of the sphere. Janet's mind, reaching out to mine, told me that she also had seen him and had answered his invitation of love. She was afire with exultation and reverent joy. Our angel, too, showed forth his bliss, and he whispered into our ears, "Such is the paradise of saints, as far as you can comprehend it now, for thus all find him, even to the fulfilment of their highest aspirations." His voice died away. He turned and wheeled off into the great void, cleaving upward towards a distant glow which we knew to be another sphere. 12. The Garden of Breath. Far into the void we continued our adventurous way. Now we had a vast array of stars to look down upon. Some appeared mere specks in the darkness. Others were nearer, and their brilliance lit up the surroundings in a blinding radiance. Here and there we passed swift-moving chariots of angels, or single guides conducting 2 or 3 visitors on a courtesy tour among the spheres. There was an immensity about this void that entranced me. I recalled how, many times on earth, I had gazed up at the sky, delighting in the stars, wondering about them, filled with the thrill of the night and the glamour of it all. How weak my imaginings now appeared compared to this reality. I looked around at the millions of starlights within view and reflected that each represented something to the inhabitants of heaven, each a place of meeting, learning, refreshing, or having some purpose far beyond my understanding as yet. The vastness of it all set my heart singing. Janet felt it too. She leaned forward with a radiant face to smile at me. "Do not think I cannot understand," he said suddenly. "I, too, find constant delight in the vast grandeur. That is one of heaven's joys. No one ever grows tired or loses the early zest of wonder. It is ever new. Our very life strength is being constantly renewed." "How?" I asked. "Do you mean that you are conscious of it?" "Yes," he said. "Just as creation is by breath, so is recreation. We angels who constantly pour out our benediction ray need to be continually renewed by the Father's power. I am on my way now to the place of renewing." "May we come too?" Janet asked in surprise. "Yes, but you will only be able to rest on the fringe of it, even in your doubled power. I shall leave you there while I go to renew my strength." "Is this place of renewing only for angels?" "No, for some of the holy ones are among men also. When they rise to great heights, they begin to pour out a mighty power when they pray for men. Many of them spend untold ages in this work alone. Oh, if the world knew the prayer power that pours down from heaven upon them. This power is so great that it would be quickly expended if these holy ones did not continually renew their strength. There are wise men on earth, too, who have learned a little of this great secret. These withdraw often into the closet of silence of the heart. Such men have a wonderful uplifting power as they move inconspicuously amongst their fellows. As our angels taught us, we continued to cleave upwards through the darkness. sometimes passing close to a brilliant star, at other times travelling great distances when only a faint glow here and there could be seen. At last we turned in the direction of a sphere that was not so bright as the others. Indeed, as we drew near, we saw that it was more like twilight, and this was further suggested by the perfume that stole forth from it. "It's like a garden at eventide," I commented. "It is a garden," our guide explained. "It's called the Garden of Breath." Smoothly we alighted on a lawn flanked on all sides with flower beds. Janet cried out in delight at this. I did not know flowers could grow on these spheres. "You are thinking of atmosphere again," our angel smiled. "Have I not said that earth people could not come here, not flowers grow? Why, if it were possible for men in physical bodies to approach these heights, they would see nothing at all of this garden, nor of you, for your bodies are composed of a substance finer than all the imaginings of earth people." This filled us with wonder again, as though the angel had taught us nothing of the bodies of men. Janet and I reached out to feel the substance of each other. It was incredible that men could not have seen us, solid as we were. "It is hard to realize," our teacher smiled, "how many times I have seen men do just what you have done. Nevertheless, solid as you are, earth bodies are far more earthly, and earth eyes are far too dim to see you now." He led us on to the lawn, where we found comfortable seats set beneath some flowering bushes at one end. The fragrance of this garden was such that we continually drew deep breaths of joy, and our angel, perceiving this, said, "Even here on the fringe of the Garden of Breath, you will receive something of the Father's power. Remember, they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength. Rest here, then, until I return." He gave us a swift blessing, parted the bushes, and disappeared from sight. Janet and I, sitting at ease in the garden, felt that we should not mind in the least if we remained here forever. Every moment and every breath was a joy. People on earth who are receiving strength after an illness do so slowly, being almost unaware of the process. Here, though, we were in perfect health before. A zest and alertness poured into us with such power that we were conscious of it all the time. Unable to contain my ecstasy, I burst into a psalm and Janet joined with me. As we sang, we inhaled deeply of the fragrance, and the very flowers seemed to bow in sympathy. "I will sing of the mercies of the Lord forever. With my mouth will I make known thy faithfulness, and the heavens shall praise thy wonders, O Lord, thy faithfulness also in the congregation of thy saints. For who in the heaven can be compared unto the Lord? Who among the sons of the mighty can be likened unto the Lord?" As we sang, we became aware that a third voice had joined with ours, and at last our notes died away. The bushes parted and a man appeared. He was so majestic in his attitude and so shining with inward light that we leapt up and fell on our knees before him. "Children," he chided us. To my amazement, he put his hands upon us, raising us up. His touch sent a thrill through me. I ventured to look up into his face. What beauty I beheld! His glance was keen, but deep in its tenderness. His lips curled into a smile. All around his head, and indeed his whole outline, shone a mellow light. "Children," he said again, "you must not kneel to me. Have I not but newly knelt to him?" "But the light," I stammered. "Ah, it is his light. Now I constantly dwell within it, but once, on earth, I was covered with his shadow." "Tell us," Janet pleaded. "I was one of the crowd when the King of Love passed by. They were striking him, driving him along the place of execution. I had never seen him before, but I knew him. As he passed, I fell on my knees, praying that his shadow might fall on my head. My life was changed from that hour. I sought them out at last, his followers, and they made me one of them. Then when I passed through the gates of death, the king remembered me. On earth he had covered me with his shadow. In heaven he covered me with his light." As he spoke, we gazed up into his face. Now, despite our reverent awe, we felt we could not let him go. We laid hold of his robe and drew him to the seat. Smiling, he suffered it. And then we piled him with questions. Oh, how much we wanted to know. He had seen the king on earth. Long after, when all our questioning was stilled, he sat silently between us, bathing us in his benediction ray. Thus our angel found us, and one glance told him all. The Great One rose, then, and clasped us each by the shoulder in farewell. Very soon we were winging our way through the velvet darkness of the void. 13. The Heaven of the Babes. Where do we go now? I asked happily. We had had so many adventures that each destination was a new delight, and I pressed against our angel gratefully. How patient he had been with us, teaching us deep mysteries, step by step, so that we could understand. It is the joy of my eternity, he answered my thought, and Janet said, tell us, what is our next joy? We are on our way to the place of vision. We have already experienced that, I murmured, with a reverent thought for the majestic figure in the paradise of saints. I do not mean that kind of vision. I refer to the act of seeing. We are going to look at plants and trees. Is that all? Janet interrupted. But we have seen them everywhere. Seen them? The angel laughed deeply at this. You have received but a hazy impression of them. What do you know about a plant or a tree? Suddenly I remembered how my angel guide had taught me long ago concerning the restricted vision of men. She had asked me to describe a tree and had then asked how it remained upright when I did not include its root. I know what you mean. An angel told me that in heaven's realm one sees the whole of a tree or plant at once. It seems very difficult to understand, Janet commented. It will not be so once you have visited the place of vision, our angel promised. After that you will be able to roam over the power planes with truly seeing eyes. I thought it was only in the place of vision we would see. No. Have you not realized, my children, that when you visit these spheres you come away with something of the power you found there? That is why you are not allowed to enter some of them. You are not ready to receive the power. We were very interested and began to think back over our former visits. No wonder our teacher had been so careful to explain the nature of each to us. Presently, he said, remember that there is no standing still in heaven's realm. All the time men are learning and growing. Even your stay at the plane between was part of your training. As each man acquires information, he makes it a part of himself, so that it may become power. Then we shall be able to enjoy this wonderful clarity of vision, I marvelled. What a lot we shall learn. It is another step upward, children. You will never lose your joy in this power, for by it many mysteries of nature will be revealed. You will be able to investigate the smallest and the greatest of nature's glory, both appreciating the beauty around you and knowing its cause. As he spoke, we increased our speed, cleaving upwards through a vast darkness to a shining far beyond. Very soon we alighted on the sphere and began to look around with interest. My first thought was that there was nothing new to see. It looked like an ordinary landscape on earth. A field lay before us with waving grass upon it and an occasional bush. The ground rose gently at one side and sloped steeply at the other. Beyond we could see a valley and, yes, the roofs of houses and a church spire. What an extraordinary thing, Janet said, and our teacher laughed. It is much more extraordinary than you think. Your surprise comes because you thought it ordinary. Yes, I suppose so. Let us walk down into the valley, and we will talk as we go. We began to stroll over the grass, and we descended. A homely sight met our eyes. There were actually streets, and here and there a house set in a garden standing back from the path. People were moving quietly about. Once I saw a woman come to the door and shake a cloth as though she had been dusting. In one of the gardens a man was prowling among some rose trees, while children played round his feet. Our angel watched our surprise and smiled. Well, ask your questions, he invited. Who are these people? Janet demanded. The ones you see in the houses are those who could not enjoy heaven at present in any other way. They have dreamed of little homes and gardens all their lives. Some have been poor and lived in crowded districts. Others have been taken up with business affairs. Are they ready for the place of vision? I asked in surprise. Oh no. Then why? Children, Our teacher interrupted. Do you remember what I told you about the railway journeys and the stations? Here is another station. People are often in very high spheres, far beyond their understanding, but because they are not purple gowned, none of the powers are possible for them. Thus they walk among the deep mysteries with unseeing eyes. They may be likened to Earth Baby being taken to a museum. How much would he see? Yet all is open to his vision. Then these people cannot see the secrets of nature revealed? They see little more than they saw on earth. Yet if you ask them about a heaven outside this sphere, they would look at you in astonishment, saying, "This is heaven, there is no other." What of the children? Janet asked. It is different in their case. They are not able to receive deep wisdom yet, therefore they have the freedom of most of the planes. On earth, people often speak of deep matters before young children because they know they are unable to understand. It is so here. Do these women dust and sweep? Janet asked, remembering the woman with the cloth. Yes, and cook, smiled our angel. Here they live a life very closely resembling earth. It is the fulfillment of their desires, you see. Gradually they come to wish for more knowledge, then people are there to teach them. They have classes both for the adults and the children. How do they come here? I suddenly remembered the angel who had guided me on my term of reparation. My guide said I could not climb to the higher planes, but that she would have to visit them for me. Ah, that was because your eyes were beginning to open. Once you began your term of reparation, you were no longer a child. You had begun to grow up and could not be likened to an Earth Baby visiting a museum. Then none of these people are on their term of reparation yet? Janet asked. They do not think there is one. They are perfectly content in what they think is all of heaven. So do they ever wish to see the king? I asked wonderingly. Oh yes, in a way they do, but they only see him as they expected to, as a great teacher. Sometimes they gather in the church and then he comes to them. They see him only as a wise and tender man. Usually angels conduct the services and lead the singing, and they are quite content with this. How strange, Janet mused. But they are but babes. They will learn. Our angel looked so confident that we were quite reassured. We had walked down a long street during this conversation, and now we came upon a small park where women were sitting talking while their children played. On 3 sides of this park the gardens of the houses could be seen, each having a small door in its back fence so that the occupants could step at once onto the lawns. See how it is planned, our guide pointed out. Some architect has been here who has never been able to realise his dreams on earth. Was he one of the babes too? I asked. No, he came to receive the power of vision. There are both classes of people here, those who are the babes and those who are ready for the power. Why are they classed together then? Well, each unconsciously serves the other. The babes need the houses of earth life to fulfill their desire, and the others need the buildings as subjects for their study. Here both men and angels come to renew and receive their clarity of sight. When they have it, they are able to look at, say, that house, he pointed across the park, and see not only the building but its foundations, not only its exterior but its interior. Then, looking at the stone of which it is composed, they can see the moving cells of its texture. They can examine the texture of everything within the house, look at the plants in the garden, watching them in all of their phases of growth at once, search into the soil, seeing, highly magnified, the wonderful colours of the minerals hidden there. But this is but a small portion of their sight. What a wonderful power! Janet and I spoke together. Yes, so you see how the 2 classes of people serve each other. It is a plan often followed in heaven's realm. Yet we have never noticed the babes among those of the higher planes, I marvelled. You had not reached that station on your railway journey. Our guide smiled. 14. The place of vision. Janet had been looking at the houses with interest as we went on our way. I noticed that every one is different, she said at last. Why is that? It is for 2 reasons, and for both the classes of people. These babes often have longed for a house different from all others. Here they choose their own and take great delight in it. Then those who are here to learn or renew their clarity of vision need only one house of each kind. Do the people build the houses for themselves? I asked. No, for they have not the skill. These houses are built by those who have always worked at that trade on earth and whose heaven it is to do so here. Once more, you see, each unconsciously serves the other. I had been seeking an elusive thought for some time, and at last it came to me. What purpose is served by people looking at houses and seeing clearly, as you have explained? Of course, I realise that it must be interesting, but how is the knowledge used afterward? Ah, cried our angel, I see you realise that nothing is wasted in heaven's realm. These people are of great value to mankind on earth. How is that? Do they go there? No, but the guardian angels do. These men become advisors to the angels. Remember that angels have no experience of earth life except in what they observe. Without the consultations with these clear-seeing ones, they would be handicapped on earth. Now suppose there is an architect earnestly labouring in the world, with a good dream in his heart. His guardian angel may come here to observe and also to consult the men who understand these matters. Then, fully armed with the necessary knowledge, he will return to his charge on earth. That architect will succeed beyond his dreams, and when questioned will probably say, "It just came to me." How lovely it all is, Janet said. There is no end to the Father's thought for men. While we talked, we had passed onto a broad road where there were smaller houses than we had seen before. Almost all of them had perambulator at the door. Some of them had washing hanging on the lines just glimpsed at the back. Janet and I could not restrain our laughter at this, and our guide smiled with us. It is amusing you, I know, but it is not in the least so to these people. It is what they have secretly expected heaven to be. They could conceive of no greater bliss, and since heaven is fulfillment, it gives to each the highest joy which they are capable of conceiving. Think of the meaning of the word conceive, and it will all become clear. It means both to become pregnant and to imagine, to visualize the meaning of something. Now the word pregnant itself means both to be with child or to be full of meaning. Do you see the connection? A little. These babes have formed a mental picture of heaven while on earth. They have conceived it in the mind. It has become pregnant with meaning for them. Their expectation of heaven has been the child of their brain. Now what happens? When they pass through death's door and come to the eternal life, this child also comes to life. They see outwardly the very picture they have built up inwardly. Thus every man is a creator in his imagination. This is why he himself forms his own heaven or hell. It is wonderful, yet so obvious when you are shown, Janet said. There again, a dictionary on earth could have unveiled the wisdom, our teacher pointed out. Most of the great truths are there all the time, but men do not look with seeing eyes. As he spoke, we passed a house where people were chatting together. When they saw us approaching, they instantly darted inside and closed the door. Why did they do that? I asked in astonishment. Our guide smiled. Angels did not form part of their mental picture. Thus they resent our presence and will not speak with us. However, they grow out of that after a time, and then we teach them. Another door opened, and this time a little family came out, a young man and woman with 2 children clinging to their hands. They were laughing, and when they caught sight of us, greeted us gaily. "Good day, sir." The man touched his forehead with a quick salute. The woman dropped a little curtsy. The 2 children smiled placidly at us. When they passed by, Janet said, "Do they always call you sir?" Mostly, we were merely teachers or advisors to these people. We take the place of official ministers of earth in their eyes. You will come across many of these babes when you begin to collect material for your book. Then you will understand more fully. How interesting it will be, Janet cried. We will see the heaven that is fulfillment to them all. We will see the children of their mind pictures of earth. It will take a long time, though. You could spend all eternity and still not see the mansions of their dreams. By now we have left the streets behind and had followed a narrow pathway into a wood. Soon our guide halted in a little glade. "This will do nicely for the receiving of your power." "I had almost forgotten it," Janet confessed. "Those people interested me so much that I wanted to begin our book right away." "This power will be indispensable to you nevertheless. You will be able to observe then instead of merely forming an impression." As we stood before him, he lifted up his hands as though in blessing and began to breathe deeply. Immediately that drowsiness I had known before began to steal over me. I sank down on the grass beside Janet, looking at the light reflected in a pond nearby. This light, I dimly realised, poured from our angel's uplifted hands. I too began to breathe deeply and slowly. Presently we came to ourselves. Our teacher was sitting on the grass with his back against a tree. He was watching us, smiling. "So you are awake? Well, now you must try out your new power." "What shall we practice on?" Janet asked, looking around with interest. "Why not choose?" "Well, I would like to take up a drop of water in the palm of my hand and look at that." She went over to the pond and our teacher followed. "Then you will love its life story," he assured her. "It will have much to reveal to you. You will be carried for miles in your mental vision, gushing over rocks, joining up with little streams, then flowing into a river and out to sea. You will be drawn up into the clouds and look down upon the darkening earth." I remembered the story that was being told in the Hall of Orators and asked, "Is that how A Drop of Water came to be written?" "Yes. One came here to receive the power and later practised on a drop of water." Janet was kneeling by the pond, gazing with a rapt expression at the water in her palm. The angel turned to me. "What will you choose?" I pulled off a silver wood from a nearby trunk. "This." Immediately I began to look at it. I fell into a kind of absorption of spirit. Sinking down on the grass, I bent my gaze onto the atom of wood. It seemed to expand, to reveal itself as fast-moving mass of cells. Then I saw in its depths, as though it were a living illustration, a tiny seed down deep in the soil. I watched the vital forces alive within the tiny womb, saw them moving, striving the one with the other, finally bursting from restraint so that that slender shoot appeared. Fascinated, I watched both root and shoot creep out, displacing the soil. The mechanism of it all thrilled me. So small, and yet having more organisation than the mightiest machine of earth. Presently the little plant rose above the ground, but I still could see its activity beneath the surface. In addition, I saw as in a mist picture the whole outline of the full-grown tree. I watched it exploring its shoots spread out, gradually filling up the mist pattern. Taller it grew, and taller, putting forth leaves, then fruit, then seed. I saw season after season go by, while the tree filled out to the girth of its pattern. At long last I saw a man approach the now broad trunk. He seemed vaguely familiar. Then in a flash I recognised myself. I watched the silver of the wood detached, and glancing up, beheld Janet and my angel beside me. "Have I been here an immeasurable length of time?" I asked. "What is time?" said our angel, exactly as Stephen had said in the circle of prayer long ago. "Can we see everything in this way now?" Janet asked. "You can see all things like this at will," our teacher assured us. "Henceforth you have this power at your command. Look," he pointed to our robes. At first I saw that an intricate design had appeared on the edges of them. Then on closer inspection I perceived that the central motif was a tiny opened eye. "Even the designs on the robes speak, you see," smiled our teacher. "Thus we know the exact progress of all. Come now," he said suddenly. "Our tour among the spheres is ended." With one movement he caught us to his sides, and a moment later we were wheeling above the houses. Very soon we had left the sphere behind, and then we began to cleave downward through the void. "Are we going back to the broad field?" I asked as we watched star after star flash upward. "No, Then where? Janet asked. The angel smiled down at us. You will see. 15. The Mountain of Worship. Although we travelled with speed of light, it seemed a long time before we reached our destination. On the way, our angel talked to us, and at last he said that we were to visit, by the angel's power, the Mountain of Worship. However, you have been there before, he added surprisingly. When? Janet and I spoke together. Many times. You do not recall your visits to the Hall of Audience? We looked at him in astonishment. How can it be both? Janet asked. It is the Hall of Audience according to men and the Mountain of Worship according to angels, he explained. When you visit the hall, you saw, at first, a great dome with an atmosphere of colourful mist. Remember? Yes. Later we had a clearer vision and we saw that the mist came from the light pouring through angels' wings. Then what of the dome? Can you explain that? No, I said. I thought this was just the nature of the ground. So it is. It is the peak of the Mountain of Worship. You saw only the great dome. We angels see the whole mountain. Then that is why people seemed to walk over a rim when they went away from us, Janet exclaimed. We never suspected that. You only see that which you are ready to see, our angel reminded us. Now that you are visiting the Hall of Angels' Power, you will see much more. How thrilling it is, I cried. What shall we do there? Shall we see anyone receive a star or a flower or a virgin's crown? No, that joy is to come. This time you will be able to join the angels in their worship of the Father. His voice dropped. Here we are lifted up by love songs towards the eternal throne. We were silent a moment, and then I asked, what do you mean by being lifted up by love songs? The love songs are psalms, he explained. The real object of the singing is that it increases the vibration of the heart, and each one is thus enabled to soar up toward the Father's love. The flight is not an actual one, but it is a lifting up to a higher degree. Your robes will tell of your visit later on, for the design of their borders will change to silver. Then angels who see you will smile joyfully, knowing you have joined them in the worship of the Great One. I shall love the psalms, Janet mused. For some time, as we had travelled downward, I had glimpsed the vague outline of the mountain. Now, as we drew near, Janet and I cried out in wonder at its beauty. We alighted on a kind of plateau. It was on top of such a very high mountain that we were wreathed with clouds. As far as we could see on every side there were other mountains, but these were all dwarfed by the one on which we were standing. Mist and clouds swirled above their tops, so that we were looking down upon them and then up to a sky of deep, dazzling blue. There was such a sense of vastness and grandeur about it. All for a time we could not speak. We just stood still, taking great breaths of the rare, keen air. Presently we were joined by little groups of angels coming up over the rim of the mountain peak. Some came with particularly joyful faces from a region where light blazed. I knew then that these angels had been in special communion with the King of Love and the Great Mother. Some of them still carried flowers in their hands, from which there stole an exquisite perfume. A few at a time, the angels came to swell the group where Janet and I stood, until there was a vast multitude. Then they began to sing. At first it seemed like a confused outburst of praise, but gradually I began to hear the words. I knew then that they were ranging over the psalms, mingling many together in one great song of worship. Janet too realised this at the same time, for she started to sing. As I joined with her, I found that by an unknown power, I just knew what verse would be chosen next, so that I was able to sing with as much confidence as the angels. In the Lord I put my trust, went ringing and echoing over the mountains. How say ye to my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? The Lord is in his holy temple, the Lord's throne is in heaven's Lord. Who will abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall swell in their holy hill? He that walketh uprightly and worketh righteously and speaketh the truth in his heart. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their word to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun. His going forth is from the end of heaven, and his circuit unto the ends of it, and there is nothing hid from the heat thereof. The law of the Lord is perfect, converting the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The statutes of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring for ever. The judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. No words of mine can describe the beauty of this mountain music. Janet and I stood with our guide, set about with a great company of angels. As the volume of sound swelled and throbbed around us, we each had a curious sensation of being lifted up. Lighter and lighter we seemed to grow, until it seemed that our feet were above the earth, and that we were soaring high in the air, like larks in the midst of their song. Far above us, a great shaft of golden light cleft the blue sky, and inwardly we knew it came from the region of the eternal throne. Still the psalms rolled out. We were filled with a power and an ecstasy never before known. The shaft of light green, wide and deep until we could see right into it. Far, far above us we glimpsed the myriads of thrones of angels in the glorious rainbow hues of their robes. Suddenly the music lifted and rang even higher. There was a movement in the crowd, and then our King of Love stood within this circle of angelic praise. A blinding white light poured from him. He was robed entirely in white, too, so that it was impossible to see whether he were clothed in a garment or with light alone. His radiance flowed out to touch us all, increasing our bliss to a hitherto unknown intensity. He seemed to sweep us all up in his embrace and to carry us with him in an immeasurable distance into the sky. Higher and higher sank the worshippers of God. The throbbing notes seemed to form a mighty stairway to the feet of the Father, and down that stairway our love song came, the song of his love. Then, when we had reached the height of unimaginable bliss, the singing died away. There was a hush, deep, unfathomable. We seemed to be poised in the blue vastness of the sky, held in our beloved one's arms. Over the mountain tops came a whisper, sweet and thin. Slowly it circled among the peaks, gradually increasing in volume. In trance, we followed it with yearning ears. Full and round it grew until it filled the sky, and then we heard it. It was one single word. At that word, all of heaven was hushed to stillness. In my heart I knew that this word was a knowing of the Father, that at last, after all my wanderings, my sins and my strivings, my hopes and longings, my penitence and reparations, my growing into knowing, I had contacted him. Like a child, I was being held up in the everlasting arms, even unto the radiance of the Father's light, unto the adorable splendour of his love. We were mute in rapturous awe. 12. The Garden of Breath. Far into the void we continued our adventurous way. Now we had a vast array of stars to look down upon. Some appeared mere specks in the darkness. Others were nearer, and their brilliance lit up the surroundings in a blinding radiance. Here and there we passed swift-moving chariots of angels, or single guides conducting 2 or 3 visitors on a courtesy tour among the spheres. There was an immensity about this void that entranced me. I recalled how, many times on earth, I had gazed up at the sky, delighting in the stars, wondering about them, filled with the thrill of the night and the glamour of it all. How weak my imaginings now appeared compared to this reality. I looked around at the millions of starlights within view and reflected that each represented something to the inhabitants of heaven. 12. Each a place of
Garden of
meeting,
Breath.
learning, refreshing.
Far into the void we
having
continued
some
our
purpose
adventurous
far
way.
beyond my understanding.
Now we had a
as
vast
yet.
array of stars to look down
The
upon.
vastness
12.
of it all
Some
set my
appeared mere
heart
specks
racing
in
in
the
the
darkness.
Janet felt it
Others
too.
were
Far
nearer,
into the
and
void
their
we leaned
brilliance
forward
continued
with
our
a
adventurous
radiant
way.
way of blinding.
Now we had a
radiance.
vast array of stars to look
Here
down
and there
upon.
we passed
Some appeared
swift-moving
do not think
chariots
I
of
cannot
angels,
understand,
or single
others were
guides
nearer, and
conducting
their
2 or
brilliance
3
lit up the
visitors
surroundings
on a
I,
courtesy
too,
tour
find
among
constant
the
delight in the
spheres.
vast grandeur.
Here and there
There
we
was
passed
one of
swift-moving
about this
chariots
world that
of
entranced
angels.
me. No one ever grows
Or
tired
single
or
guides
loses
conducting
the
2
early
or 3
zest of
visitors
wonder.
on a
I
courtesy
gazed
tour
up at the sky,
among the
delighting in the
spheres.
stars,
Being constantly
wondering
wondering
immensity
about
about this
filled
world,
with the
how,
thrill
I
of the
asked,
night.
do you mean that you are
And
the
the glamour
how,
of it all.
many times on earth?
Yes, he said.
How
I
weak my
just as
imagination
creation
is
is
by
by
breath,
breath,
so is
prepared
wondering
for
this
about
reality.
them.
We
Filled with
angels
the
who
thrill of the
constantly
night.
pour
I looked
out our
around at the
benedictions
millions
and
of
the starlights
need to be
within view,
continually renewed
and reflect
by
how
the
weak
Father's
my
power.
imaginings now to
I am
the
on my way
inhabitants
now,
of heaven,
prepared
to
for
this
renewal.
reality. Each a place of meeting.
May we come
I
too?
looked around at the millions
Refreshed,
of
asked in
starlights
surprise,
within
having
view,
some purpose
and
far
reflect
beyond
that you will
the
only be able to
understanding
rest on the fringe of
something
it,
to the
even in your double
vastness
power.
of it all.
Each a
I
place
shall
of
leave you
meeting.
there while I go to
Learning,
renew
Janet
my
felt
strength
it
too.
refreshing. She leaned
Is this
forward
place
with
of
a radiant
renewing
face
only
only
for
standing
angels?
as yet.
No,
The
for some
vastness
of the
of it
holy
all
ones
set my
are
heart
men,
think I
men
cannot
also.
understand.
Janet felt
When they
it
rise
too.
to great
He said
heights,
so.
they
They
lean
begin to
forward
pour out
with a
a
radiant
radiant
face.
power
I, too,
and smile.
find
They pray
constant
for
delight
men.
in the vast grandeur.
Many of them spend
That is one
untold
of heaven's
ages
joys.
doing
Do not
this
think
work
I cannot
alone.
understand.
No one ever
Though
grows
a tired
tired
or
or
loses
loses
the
the
early
prayer
zest
power
of
that
wonder.
pours down
I,
from
too,
heaven
find
on
constant
our very
delight in the
lives. This
vast
power is
grandeur.
so great that it would
That is one of heaven's
expended if
joys.
these holy
How,
ones
I
did not
asked, no one ever
continually
grows
renew
tired
conscious
or
of it.
loses the early
There are
zest
wise
of
men,
wonder.
yes, he said,
It is ever new.
just
Just
as
as
creation
creation
is
is
by
by
breath,
breath,
so is
constantly
these
renewed.
withdraw often into
We
the
angels
close
who
clouds.
constantly pour
Do you
out
mean
our
that you are
benedictions
such men have a
need to be
wonderful
continually
uplifting power
renewed,
sustained by the Father's
just
power
as creation is by
I am
breath,
on my way
so
now
is
to the place of
recreation.
renewing.
As
We
our
angels
who
who constantly
constantly
come
pour
to
out
to
our
cleave upwards
benedictions
in the
and
darkness,
need to be continually
sometimes
renewed.
passing
But
close
you
to
will
our
only
own
be able
star.
to rest on the fringe of
I am on
times,
my
even
way
in
now
your
to
double
the places
power.
when only a faint
I
glow
shall leave
here
you there
and
while
there
I go to
renew
renew
my strength.
At last we
Asked in
turned in the
surprise.
direction
Is this
of a
place
sphere
of renewing?
but
was
you will
not
only
so
be able
bright
to
as
rest
the
on the
others.
fringe of it.
Indeed,
Even
in your double
for some of the
power
holy
near, we
ones
saw
are
the
I shall
emerald
leave you
light
there
while
while
I go to renew my
and
strength.
when they
Was
rise
first
to great
suggested
heights,
by the
is this
perfume
place
of
of renewing
power
only
when
for angels?
they pray for men.
It's like a garden.
Many of them
Even
spend
some of the
untold
holy ones
ages
are
in this
among
work
men.
alone.
It is a
Also,
garden.
Oh,
When
it's
they
a
rise to
garden
great
too.
heights,
It's
they
called the
pray
garden
power
of
of mighty
down from
power
heaven upon them.
Smoothly we alighted
power
on a
is
long
so great
fence
that
on all
all
sides
sides
with
were
flowers
expended in these holy
Janet
words
cried
did not
out in
continually
delight.
renew
Oh, if the
their
world
strength.
knew! I did not know
prayer
flowers
wise
grow on
men
this
pours
sphere
down
too.
from heaven
You have
upon
learned a
them.
little
You are
of this
thinking
great
this power is
atmosphere
so
again.
great that it would
These
not
withdraw
be
often
expended
into
if
the
these
Have I
holy
not
ones
said
did
that
not
earth and
continually
heart could not
renew their
come
strength?
such men have a
Not
wonderful
there
hour
are
to
wise men
grow.
on earth, they
Too.
move
Why, if it were
You have
possible
learned
for
to
men
live
in
like a
physical
sacred
bodies
bird.
to approach these heights,
These
they would
withdraw
see
often
nothing. As
into
our
the
angels
close
taught
gardens.
us, we
The
continue
path
to
to
cleave
cleave upwards
Your
so to
bodies
have
have
a
a
wonderful
wonderful
uplifting
sometimes
power
flying
as they
close
move
to a
their
brilliant
star
star,
amongst
at
our
other times
fellows.
travelling great distances
This filled
when
us with
only
wonder.
as our
Glow
angels
here
taught
and there.
us,
As
as
we
though the
continued
angel
to
had
cleave
taught us
upwards,
nothing
at
of
last
the
we
bodies
turned
of
in the
men.
direction of the
Sometimes
spheres.
partial
Janet
clouds
knows
were
not
not
so
so
bright
bright
as
as
the
the
others.
others. At other times
Indeed,
travelling great
it was
distances
incredible
when
that
only
men could not
make
see
more
this
like
twilight
solid
as
as
we
we
were.
And this was first
At last we
suggested
turned
by
in
the
the
It is hard to
direction of the
realise
star
that
forth
it was
from
not so bright
How
as
many
the others.
times
It's
I have
like a
seen
garden
men do
that
just
even
as
as we
we drew near, we saw that it was more like twilight.
Solid as
It's a
you
garden,
are,
and this
our
was
guide
first
suggested,
bodies.
it's
It's called the Garden
that
of
our
Breath.
earth eyes are far too
Smoothly,
dim
we
to see
alighted
like
on
a
a lawn
garden
flanked on
even
all sides with
he led us
flowers.
on.
Janet
Janet
cried
cried
out,
out,
"Is a garden,
comfortable
comfortable
seats."
seats.
I did not
It's
know
called the
flowers
Garden
grow
of
on this
Breath.
wind.
Smoothly,
You are thinking
we
of
alighted on the
atmosphere
lawn
that we
flanked on all sides with flower
deep
beds.
breaths
Have
of
I
joy.
not
Janet
said
cried
that
out
in
in
our
delight
angel
of
receiving
receiving
this said,
I did not know flowers
even
would grow
here
on
on
this
the fringe
field.
of the
Why,
Garden
if it
of
were possible
Breath,
for men,
you are
you will
thinking
receive
about
something
something
of
of
the
the
Father's power.
they would see nothing
Remember,
at all.
have I not said
earth,
they that wait on the Lord shall renew their strength.
Substance,
Rest here.
why, if it were possible for men in physical bodies to approach these heights, this filled us with wonder.
He gave us a swift blessing, parted the bushes and disappeared from sight.
Substance.
Janet and I, sitting at ease in the garden, felt that we should not
It was
mind
incredible
the
that
we
men would not
remained
have
here
seen
forever.
us, solid
As though
as
the
we
angel
were.
had taught us nothing of the bodies of men.
It is hard to realise
Janet and I reached out to our
how many
receiving
times I
speech
have
after
seen
an
men
illness.
do just
It
what
was
you do so
incredible
slowly.
that men could not have seen
Nevertheless,
us, almost
solid as
unaware
we
of the
are.
process.
Earth bodies
Here,
are
though,
it is hard to realise
perfect
Earth
healthy
are far too
How many times I have
seen
seen
men
men
do
do
just
into
what
us
you
with
have
such
done. He led
power
us
that
on,
we were
nevertheless,
conscious of the law
solid
where we
as we
found
are.
comfortable seats,
Earth bodies
unable
are
to
far more
contain my
earthy
ecstasy.
and Earth
I
eyes
burst
are
into
far
a
too
song,
fragrant
and
and
Janet
garden
joined
was
with me.
such that we
As
continually
we sang,
led us
deeply
on
inhaled
joy
into the lawn where we found
comfortable
the very
seats
flowers
set
seemed
beneath
to
some
bow.
flowers. Even here on the fringe of the garden of breath, the fragrance
I will
of the
receive the
garden
mercies
that
of
we
the Lord
continually
forever.
do.
With
Deep
my
mouths
mouth
of
will
joy.
I make known
And
thy
our
faith
they
and
that wait on the
receiving
Lord
this,
shall
and the
renew
heaven
their
shall
strength.
praise
Even
thy
here
wonders,
on the
O
fringe of
Lord,
the garden of
until
thy
I return.
faithfulness,
You will
also in
receive
the
something of the
congregation of
Father's
thy
power.
saints.
Remember,
He
who
gave
in
us a
heaven
swift
can be
blessing.
compared
They
unto
that
the
wait
Lord?
on the
Parted the
Lord
bushes
shall
and
renew their
disappeared
strength.
from
The
sight.
mighty can be
Rest
lightened
Janet and I,
unto the
sitting
Lord.
at ease in the garden, felt
As
that
we
we should
sang,
not mind in the
we
least if
became
we
aware
remained
that
in
He
the
gave us
third
a
voice
swift
had joined
blessing.
with
Every
and
moment
parted the
turned
bushes
every
and
night
disappeared
away
from
joy.
sight.
The bushes
Janet and I,
planted
sitting
a man
at ease in
receiving
the garden,
strength after
felt
he
that
was
we
so
should not mind
majestic
in
in
the
his
least if we
attitude
remained
and
here,
so
being
shining
almost
within
unaware
with
of the
light.
process
That we leapt up
every
and fell on our
moment
knees
we were in
before him.
perfect health before.
People on
Children
earth
who are
receiving
receiving
strength
after an illness.
to my amazement,
through
we
such
such hands
power
upon
that
us,
we were
raising
being
us up
almost
all the
unaware
time.
of the
His
process.
touch sent a thrill through me.
Unable
Though
to contain
we
my
were adventurous
ecstasy,
to look up into his
I
face.
burst into a
What
song, and
beauty and
Janet
alert
joined with me.
poured into
His
us.
glance
As we
such
sang,
power
we
that we
inhaled
deep in
deeply
it the
all
tenderness and the very flowers.
His lips
Unable to
curled
contain
into a
my
smile.
ecstasy,
All
I
around
burst
his head
into a
and
song,
indeed
and
I will
Janet
sing
joined
of the
with me.
mercies of the Lord forever.
As we sang,
with my
we
mouth
inhaled
will I
deep
make
children,
known thy
faithfulness,
faithfulness.
and the very
You
flowers
must not
that
kneel
shall
to me.
praise thy
Have I
wonders,
not
O
but
Lord.
newly knelt to him? Thy faithfulness
I
I will
will
sing of the
delight
mercies
of
of
the
thy
Lord
saints.
forever.
With my
It is
mouth
who in
will
the
I
heaven
make
can be
known
Now I
thy
constantly
unto the
dwell
Lord.
within it,
And
who
the
at
heavens
once
shall
on
praise thy
earth can
wonders
be
covered with
covered
his
unto
shadow.
the Lord.
Thy faithfulness
Tell us,
also in the
as we
congregation
sang,
of thy
we
saints.
became aware
For
that
who in the
I was one of
heavens
the
can be
crowd when the
compared
King
unto
of
the
Love
Lord?
passed
Thou
by.
knowest
Who among
our
the
sons
they were
of the
striking
mighty
him,
can be
the
lightened
driving
unto
him
the
along the
Lord.
place of execution.
He
As
was
we
so
sang, I'd
majestic
never
in his
seen
attitude
came aware
and
that
so
I knew
shining
him
within
joined
with
with us.
light.
As he
And at
passed, we
last
leapt
thou
up, fell
knowest
on my
our
knees,
knees
praying
before
that his
him.
shadow
The
might
bushes
fall on my
parted
head.
and a man
My
appeared.
life was changed
He was
from
so
that hour.
majestic
He
in
put
his
his hands
attitude. I saw
upon
them
us,
out
raising
so
us up
shining
with
within
followers.
with light.
His touch
And they
sent
made
a thrill
leapt up
through
and
me.
fell on our knees
I
before
ventured
him.
to look up into his face.
Children,
The
what
King
beauty I
remembered me.
beheld. To my
On
amazement,
earth
he
he
glanced
had
with his
covered
hands
me with
upon
his
us,
shadow.
raising
Deep
us
in
up
it,
in
in
heaven.
heaven,
His touch sent a
me
thrill
with
through
his
me.
light.
His lips curled into a
I
smile.
ventured to look up into
All
his
around
face
his head and
what
gazed
beauty
up
of
into
his
his
face.
outline shone a
His
glance
despite
was
our
keen.
reverent awe,
But deep in
children
his
we could not let him go.
You must
His
not
lips laid
kneel to
hold
me.
of his robe
Have I
and drew
not
him
but
to
all
kneeling
around
knelt
his
to him,
head and
smiling.
indeed
But
his
the
whole
light,
outline
I stammered.
shone a mellow light.
And then we
it
piled
is
him with
his light.
questions.
Children,
Now I constantly
how
dwell
much
within
we wanted
it.
You must not kneel to me.
On earth,
Have
he
I
had seen
not
the
but
King
kneeled
on
down
earth.
to him?
Tell us,
the light,
Janet
long
stammered.
after, when all our questioning
it is
was
his
still,
light. I was one of the crowd
Now I
that
constantly
constantly
dwell
dwell
within
within
it,
it.
bathing
But
us
once
in his
they were
presence.
striking
I
him,
was covered
driving him
as
along
our
the
angel
place of
found
execution.
and one
Janet,
glance
please, I'd
told him
never
all.
seen him before.
But
I was one of the
rose.
crowd when the
As
King
he
of Love
passed,
clasped
us
fell on
each
my
by the
knees. They were
shoulder in
striking
farewell.
shadow might driving him
Very
along the
soon we
place
were
of
winging
execution.
our
My life
way
was
through the
changed from
velvet
that hour. I'd
darkness
never
of the
seen
void.
him before.
I sought them out
but
at
I knew
last,
his
him.
followers. As he passed,
And they made me one
I
of
fell
them.
on my knees,
Then
praying
when
that
I
his
passed
shadow
through the
might
gates
fall
of
on my
death,
head.
the King
My
remembered
life was
me.
changed from that hour.
On earth he had covered me
I
with
sought
his
them out
shadow.
at last, his followers.
In heaven,
he
and they
covered
made
me
me
with
one
his
of
light.
them. Then when I passed through the gates of death,
As he spoke, we
the King
gazed up
remembered
into his
me.
face.
On
Now,
earth he had
despite our
covered me with
reverent
his
awe,
shadow.
we felt
In
we could
heaven,
not let him
he
go.
covered me with his light.
We laid hold of
of his robe and drew him to the seat. As he spoke, we gazed up into his face. Now, despite our reverent awe, with questions, we felt we could not let him go. How much we wanted to know. We laid hold of his robe. He had seen the king on earth. Smiling, he suffered it. Long after, when then we piled him with questions, he sat silently between us, bathing us in his benediction. He had seen the king on earth. Thus our angel found us, and one glance told him all. When all our questioning was stilled, the great one rose. He sat silently between us, clasped us each by the shoulder in farewell. Thus our angel found us, our way through the velvet darkness of the void. The great one rose, then, and clasped us each by the shoulder in farewell. Very soon we were winging our way through the velvet darkness of the void.